Good evening, and I've come to you to talk to you tonight about a third book I wrote, on politics, which I've had self-published with Lulu. It's called For Workers' Chamber, and I wrote it very, very much as a reaction to the corporatism in contemporary politics. Now, when political scientists talk about corporatism now, what they mean is the system whereby private companies and big business are giving substantial donations to political parties, and in return they help define those parties' policies. And they will also supply some of their senior personnel to government, right? It's got to the point in America that the other year Harvard University said, thanks to this system of political donations and quid pro quo between the Democrats and the Republicans, they could no longer say that America was totally a democracy. It was more like an oligarchy. In Britain, this became notorious under Tony Blair, the former leader of the Labour Party. Blair and in Peter Mandelson's words, Mandelson said, this party is extremely relaxed about making people rich. And what happened under New Labour is that the grassroots of the Labour Party were ignored in favour of big donors from big business. They gave Blair substantial donations, and in return, some of the policies Blair enacted favoured them. And also he put them in charge. He put senior managers and executives, if not actually chairman of the board, from these private companies in charge of government departments. George Monbiot, the Guardian journalist, documented this in a very, very interesting book, Captive State, which gives the list of some of these captains of industry who were awarded positions in government and the positions they made. And he gives example after example of how New Labour under Blair favoured big business, like the corporation, like the big supermarkets, and also private construction firms under the Private Finance Initiative. Now, there was a book came out a while ago just revealing how much Parliament was dominated by the very rich, just in terms of the personal wealth of the MPs who actually sit in Parliament. Something like 75% plus of them were millionaires, and accompanied with something like 12 company directorships each or something like that. It was ridiculous. I mean, it went on, and with collective wealth in hundreds of millions or even billions, I think, altogether. Now, this wouldn't have mattered so much if the Labour Party was also doing its job for the working people it was set up to represent, but it wasn't. It was privatising the public services. Blair, as I've said in a previous video, wanted to sell off the NHS, and it put in tuition fees and attacked the welfare state. It was, in some ways it didn't do too bad a job, but it was making people poorer. And then along came David Cameron and Theresa May, who have made things very, very, very much worse. And so it's because of that I wrote a book, this book, For Workers' Chamber, in which I argue that if we have all these rich MPs in Parliament, we ought to have a chamber reserved for the poor, for working people. For working people, elected by working people, according to their industry. And this is what originally the Labour Party was for. It grew out of the trade unions in the Liberal Party, the Liberal Party. They were called Lib Labs, who then split off after the Taftell judgment in order to fight for the rights of working people and trade unions. And they were then joined around about 1901, 1905, I think perhaps, by the various socialist organisations that were around at the time. Now, I'll read you the blurb on the back. For Workers' Chamber argues that a special representative chamber composed of representatives of the working class elected by the working class is necessary to counter the domination of Parliament by millionaires and the heads of industries. It traces the ideal workers' special legislative assemblies from Robert Owen's grand consolidated trade unionism, anarchism, syndicalism, guild socialism, the workers', soldiers and peasants' councils in revolutionary Russia, Germany and Austria, the utopian socialism of Saint-Simon and the corporativism of Fascist Italy. It also discusses the liberal forms of corporativism which emerged in Britain during the First and Second World Wars, as well as the systems of workers' control and producers' chambers in Tito's Yugoslavia. It argues that parliamentary democracy should not be abandoned but needs to be expanded to include a workers' chamber to make it more representative. And I think there is a good argument there. I trace it back to the Chartists in the 19th century, the Chartist movement, which was there to get every working man the vote over age 21. When they held one of their grand meetings, it was considered to be a working people's parliament. It was, in fact, some of them, some of them even referred to it as the proper parliament, and it was going to be a parliament of trades, which sounds very, very much like some of the things in Marx. And again, I'm not a Marxist, but Marx has a few things to say about the state as the instrument of class rule, and this actually applies to the state of Parliament as it is now, or as it has been, certainly under New Labour and under the Tories and Lib Dems. It's been full of millionaires who pass legislation for the rich, and no one else, or hardly anyone else. It's all been framed as being somehow beneficial to the poor, but it's not. All we've seen is an increase in poverty, in food banks, starvation, homelessness. It just goes on. Now, yeah, with these forms of workers' assembly, there are dangers of them. It was used in Fascist Italy as part of the corporate state of Mussolini. And I have nothing but contempt for fascism. Nothing. In actual fact, the Chamber of Fasci and Corporations, Musso, put in, it was nothing more than a rubber stamp for Il Duce, and it really, if you go back to Adrian Littleton, who wrote, in his book The Seizure of Power about Mussolini, says, it was there basically to give the idea that there was more to Fascist Italy than Mussolini's personal dictatorship. And that's it, it's a bit of ideological camouflage. And what did they do there? Well, he gives an example of Mussolini coming to the chamber and the fascists just start cheering him. And in actual fact, in Fascist Italy, yes, the trade unions were supposed to be involved. No, they very much did what the Fascist Party wanted them to do, and while much greater freedom was given to the employers' associations, so no. However, I also talk about the liberal corporativism of post-war Britain and Europe, in which government, employers and the trade unions were supposed to be involved together and take an equal stance in making decisions on the economy. That it definitely had its problems, particularly with the fact that the government tried to clamp down on, on strikes. It has this on strikes by putting in some of the legislation Mussolini used to control labour disputes in Fascist Italy. You have a labour court, you ban strikes and lockouts. Now, I really want to avoid this and just give, working people freedom. I don't want to see them chained. I don't want to see us chained. And as for Yugoslavia is part of the system of self-management where the people in the factories helped supervise their managers. There was a works council. There were also producers' chambers for working people as a second house in their councils. So it examines that. And the book is, I think it's about £4.50. If you want to take a look at it, I'll post up the address for Lulu. And even if you don't want to buy the book, I hope you will take the arguments on board. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you.